Ladies and gentlemen, hey, yo, fellas, let's finish up week 13. Week 13, we're getting there. Week 13 with Monday Night Football. A lovely week 13 where the Sony Michel hits, the Alexander Mattison hits, the number one play on the entire slate for leverage in George Kittle not only hits, but breaks the MFing slate. Hopefully you were paying attention. Hopefully you watched that one, dude. Hopefully you had the Patreon stuff, whatever it might be. We're going to tell you right now how to get the leverage plays, how to find the top plays for not only the captain spots, but the entire slate tonight. So let's get into this bad boy and let's slide on into it on a late night, on an early morning. The sun's not even up yet right now, an early morning for you beautiful people. So we're going to start up top with salary pricing, the most expensive player on the slate, Mr. Josh Allen here up top against New England. This is a good matchup. You have the top two secondaries in the NFL. Number one, Buffalo. Number two, New England. Some of the best defenses in the NFL, arguably the two best in the NFL for how they've been playing the last 6 weeks of the season. And we'll have one team in the Patriots that Josh Allen is going to face trending completely upwards here. So Allen is going to have about a neutral, a positive 6% pass blocking advantage. The New England pass rush ranks 20th in the NFL. And Allen is averaging about 280 yards per game on 37 attempts per game. The man has 17 or more fantasy points in every game but one, and he has 20 fantasy points or more in 6 out of his last 8. And that's going to matter tonight because the game total, if you have not paid attention yet, the game total in this game where they're expecting some foul weather is currently looking like a 41 implied game total. We haven't seen a game total that low in quite some time. Now, when I speak on that weather is going to be wind chills that are going to be potentially, it's not really too much about the snow that might happen. It's going to be wind that is going to hit gusts of 50 miles per hour. Now, if you know me, I am Mr. Sally doesn't care about weather until the caveat, until it changes the Vegas implied total, which here it has in a massive way. This game total opened at 48 implied points. It is down 7. It is down 7 points. Aaron Rodgers is worth 7 points to the spread to the Green Bay Packers. We saw that earlier this year. From a 48 team total down to a 41. So what is that going to do? Well, obviously it's going to hurt the upside of downfield passing for Joshua Allen here. But it's also going to hurt the downfield passing for Mac Jones, and it's going to be a neutral playing field. The other thing to keep in mind is that wind gusts are only really going to affect passes of 20 or more yards. It's not going to affect a wind gust for these quarterbacks who are throwing rifles and darts out there, a 15-yard slant, a 10-yard pass, a 3-yard out. So it's going to affect those 20 to 30-yard moon balls, and it definitely will. But again, wind gusts, they gust. They're not going to be happening the entire time. So it'd have to be the perfect scenario into which the wind started to gust and that deep ball was thrown, which again, this is probably going to happen 2 to 3 times per game per team. So I do think it is going to be a factor when they're hitting 50 miles per hour. We're not going to blink at that. I just think it's going to be still overrated, but the total has dropped 7 points, so we adjust that. We put that into the projections. That being said, Josh Allen is still my highest projected player on the slate by over 4 fantasy points tonight. The ownership that I currently have coming in on him is 76%. I think that ownership is fine. I think that based on his overall point upside and his mobile mobility, how about that one? Josh Allen is firmly in play today as a yes for me. His teammate Stefon Diggs at this price point of $10,600 is where it starts to become interesting. I'm going to like him. He is my second highest projected player in the slate. I have him projected for 2 more points than anybody else not named his quarterback, Josh Allen, and he continues to be as consistent as they possibly come here. I mean, you have Stefon Diggs right now. He has 15 or more fantasy points in 9 out of 11 games this year. He's basically getting to double digits in every single game. He has 15 or more fantasy points in 6 straight games, continues to find the end zone now on a very solid 25% target share on 9.2 targets per game. I mean, Stefon Diggs has been very solid, but now he gets a number 2 secondary in the NFL, where Bill Belichick is going to say, let's stop Stefon Diggs, and he gets the downside of the weather if he indeed beats his man off the line of scrimmage, which is great running routes. If he indeed beats his man, he gets the downside of now the weather can potentially impact some things. So if you're asking me right now, out of the guys, and there's only 3 of them that are $10,000 and above, if you're asking me to choose between the 2 expensive ones in Allen and Diggs, I'm going to lean to go to Josh Allen here. That said, Stefon Diggs is still in play for me, but I'm going to lean Josh Allen if you only had to pick one. Now you get to Mac Jones, where it's difficult for me to justify the Mac Jones $10,000 price tag as of right now. We'll see where the ownership comes in. I currently have Mac Jones as the lowest owned of these $10,000 players by a decent amount. That being said, though, Mac Jones I only have projected for like 14 fantasy points. Mac Jones so far this year, he has only cleared 16 fantasy points in 4 out of 12 games. And now he's facing his toughest opponent yet, the number 1 secondary, in a bad weather game. So a man who struggles to get to 16 fantasy points, which 16 fantasy points at $10,000 might be enough for this slate, depending on who else scores, but to get to it becomes a lot more difficult. So at $10,000, if there was one player above $10,000 that I did not want to get to, it would indeed be Mac Jones, but it's going to depend on ownership and the contest you're playing in. Here, listen up. This is going to be very important for leverage plays, and this is why we had a very big and successful week 13, the most successful week we've had in about 2 months in DFS, was just embracing leverage and chaos even more on these wacky slates. And this is indeed a wacky slate with wind and a 41 implied team total and 2 really good defenses, right? It might be very low scoring. So embracing that chaos here and saying, okay, will Billy B take away a Stefon Diggs? And also, what type of environments are we playing in? Am I playing in a single entry contest? Is it a small field? The smaller the field, the better, in my opinion. If it's a small field, maybe you lean both quarterbacks there. Maybe you take in the sure thing of 12 to 13 fantasy points of a Mac Jones, hope for that 16 to 18 plus fantasy point day, but you take those sure points because there's a really good chance that Stefon Diggs is going to be neutralized here, or at least a greater chance than usual given the matchup and the game environment. So that's another thing to keep in mind. Now you get down to these next two plays. There's only one guy, so here you go. There's only one guy in the $9,000 range, one guy in the $8,000 range, and in my opinion, they're both overpriced. Now, the thing that Damian Harris has going for him is he's a running back. You might see them lean on the run a little bit more here. The thing that he doesn't have going for him is he's running in a three-headed backfield. Yes, a three-headed backfield. Brandon Bolden has been playing pretty consistently around 30% of the snaps. Ramondre Stevenson in the last 2 games has played 27 and 32% of the snaps, leaving Damian Harris to only get to play in these last 2 games 42 and 36% of the snaps. I mean, if you're only getting somewhere around, let's just call it 37, 38% of the snaps, and you're priced damn near $10,000, you're going to need to score 2 touchdowns to pay off. In those last 2 games, he's had 11 and 12 touches. It's basically been a split backfield with Ramondre Stevenson, and on passing downs, 2-minute offense, 3rd down and longs, it's Brandon Bolden out there. So the upside for Damian Harris is going to solely come from needing 2 touchdowns. Now, Damian Harris is still going to be owned by about a third of the field. Give it 30 to 33%, 35%. So with that being said, if you are somebody building one lineup, if you're playing 150, even 20 lineups, you're not going to get 0% Damian Harris. But if you're playing just 1 to 2 to 3 lineups, I'm going to put a no on Damian Harris at this price point because he's in a 3-headed backfield. You get down in pricing about $1,200, and compared to Damian Harris, I think you get a more reasonably priced Kendrick Bourne, who has been involved in the offense, but it's not like he's getting a massive target share. Like, at this point, his routes have gone up in 4 straight games, seeing 24 routes in week 12, which is the second highest he's seen all year, Mr. Kendrick Bourne, and it resulted in 5 catches, 61 yards, 2 touchdowns on 6 targets. Again, the 2 touchdowns clearly getting him there. If anybody scores 2 touchdowns on a showdown slate, they will be needed, likely be needed in the captain spot. If you score a touchdown at all on this slate where there's only, right now 41 implied points, so 5 touchdowns are going to be scored in this game, maybe, yeah, you're definitely probably going to be needed depending on your price tag. But he's the consistent slot target right now. At this price point, though, he's very touchdown or bust. So you get to the pricing and it becomes interesting. It's a very interesting game theory slate because, yes, Allen Diggs and Mac Jones do provide some sort of points upside floor to them because of how the position they play for quarterbacks and how involved Stefon Diggs is. Then you get to Damian Harris, who is clearly overpriced. You get to Kendrick Bourne, who in my opinion is clearly overpriced here. Kendrick Bourne, if you're playing one lineup, would become a no for me, but it becomes very interesting to see what the ownership is as the day goes on. If Kendrick Bourne only comes in as 20% on today, on the live stream later today at 6 p.m. East Coast time, I am definitely going to have interest if he's only going to come in at that price tag because the wind is going to pick up. Kendrick Bourne playing out of the slot will be more likely a target for Mac Jones and a priority. So if you're playing in one lineup in a really small field event, I probably don't have to go here for the risk, but if you're just playing in a mid to larger field tournament, I think Kendrick Bourne remains in play, and really more so because of the fact that you have Kendrick Bourne and Damian Harris both in the same price range. I would prefer Kendrick Bourne to Damian Harris. And before we keep going to what I think is the better part of the slate, I'm going to let you know about the props that I currently have taken as of this morning, potentially more as the day goes on, and on the live stream later tonight, we will do some community props I've taken, and these numbers are extremely low, partially because the low total and the game environment of the wind. I'll take Cole Beasley, who operates out of the slot, so these deep passes aren't going to be as much of a concern. I'll take his over 26.5 receiving yards. I have Cole Beasley tonight for 44 receiving yards, so massively over this number. We take the over there. We use the code SAL. We get a free bet up to $100. And on the opposite side of that game, I take the over 18.5 receiving yards for Nelson Agholor. Now, Nelson Agholor, we're going to get to him in DFS as a solid price point guy. I have Nelson Agholor for 29 receiving yards, so I don't even have Nelson Agholor as having a good game. The wind could affect some deep opportunities for him, but he moves into the slot about a third of the time. He, and Mac Jones in general, does not have a deep yards per attempt. Yards per target on Nelson Agholor is fine, so I think the wind is not going to play as much of a factor, maybe for his one deep attempt a game, but not as much of a factor for an 18.5, especially when they adjust for the wind on offense. So we take the over on both of those guys. We use the code SAL. I put $50 on this one to try and win 150. We use the code SAL. We get a free bet up to $100. If you're not familiar with it, it is prizepicks.com. And when you sign up, if you tell them you came from the name Sal, there's a link in the description below. You get a free bet up to $100. Why not use it on a lovely divisional Monday Night Football match when you're sitting back, relaxing, maxing all cool with your beer, with your brewski, with your friends, with your significant other, or with yourself in a water bottle, whatever it might be. Get some free action on the game tonight. Prizepicks.com, code SAL for that. And since we were talking about him right there, let's start on him. It's Cole Beasley at $7,800. I mean, in my opinion, it's hard not to have interest here. Maybe not overwhelming interest on Cole Beasley because, look, this is what you're basically getting. You're getting Kendrick Bourne to be $800 more than Cole Beasley, even though, in my opinion, they have similar roles in their offense. You're just seeing Kendrick Bourne find the end zone more. And that being said, for Cole Beasley, he really hasn't been healthy all that much. He finally got back up on Thanksgiving to his normal usage role of 70% of the snaps. He's been dealing with a rib injury the 2 previous games before that, and on those 70% of the snaps, you saw him go out there and have 5 catches for 46 yards on 5 targets. I mean, that's all we want for the prop tonight, right? But if Cole Beasley can even do that tonight, get close to 10 fantasy points tonight, he might be involved. He might be needed. He might be actually viable at 7,800 because of the fact that there might not be a lot of scoring. I like that he's getting healthier. I like that he's on the field more. I like that he has the higher team total here. He's out of the slot for about 25 snaps or so. So if you're telling me to pick a guy right now, the $7,000 range is where I start to look at players and go, okay, yeah, I like those dudes. The ownership on Cole Beasley looks to be relatively decent and around like a third of the ownership, or a third of the field owning him, 33%. Now on the opposite side, you get Jakobi Meyers, who Jakobi Meyers is not finding the end zone nearly as often as Kendrick Bourne out of the slot. Jakobi Meyers, though, does not run deep routes down the field, so I'm not too concerned about him with the weather. He had, in that last game, a team high 8 targets. So he's still getting all the volume in the world. In that Week 12 game, he had 5 catches for 98 yards, just misses the 100-yard bonus. He does that tonight at this price point of 7,200. He will definitely be in winning lineups, in my opinion. He's the leading wide receiver on New England with a 24% target share, and I currently have him for about the same fantasy points as Cole Beasley. We have them getting there in different ways, maybe a little bit more volume for Jakobi Meyers, more after the catch, potentially for Cole Beasley. They play different positions, generally speaking the same position, but slot receiver versus outside X receiver. So yes, I think that, and really depends on what the day is. Sometimes Nelson Aguilar operates as the X, but Jakobi Meyers is cheaper than Cole Beasley. I have him projecting out similarly, so this is where I go. So I think a good amount of the ownership in this range is going to gravitate towards Jakobi Meyers and Cole Beasley. Nothing overwhelming, but just a good amount of it, which is why I keep Kendrick Bourne in play as a maybe, because although he's expensive, if you have that additional money and you can get different in your lineup, there's a chance Kendrick Bourne is 20% owned in your contest tonight and Jakobi Meyers is 40%. I'll take the discount on the ownership on a showdown slate leverage to try and get some usage and some upside there, if that's the case, if I can find the money. Next up, we start to get to a range that honestly becomes a dead range, but somebody's going to have to do it here, right? Somebody is going to have a 4-catch game or a touchdown along those lines. Like Matt Breida right now, he's coming into this game against New England with the 4th worst run blocking advantage on the week, and that's not great. He only played 32% of the snaps in that last game as the running back, too. That was with Zach Moss inactive for the game. Zach Moss was a healthy scratch, and Matt Breida operated as the RB2. Now, he looked good on tape, but that still only led to, in Week 12, 9 attempts and 2 targets. So I'm expecting, if Zach Moss is a healthy scratch again, right? Big if, especially for a game that looks to go run heavy here. Zach Moss was getting phased out, though, so there's a good chance that he is. I'm projecting Zach Moss out. I would expect Matt Breida to have somewhere around 10 to 12 touches in this game. For Matt Breida to have 10 to 12 touches, you're going to probably need at $6,600 either a touchdown or a big play in the receiving game. We'll keep it in play because that's going to be kind of the answer for everything here. Next up is Emmanuel Sanders. Emmanuel Sanders is the clear wide receiver 3. He got the Marshawn Lattimore treatment for the majority of the game on Thanksgiving. It only led to 3 catches for 28 yards on 3 targets. And you might be saying, no, Marshawn Lattimore was on Stephon Diggs. At times he was, but the majority of the game it was Emmanuel Sanders. Sanders has not topped 10.5 fantasy points since Week 6. These 2 high coverage zones, which you're going to see the Patriots most definitely run tonight against this Josh Allen team, it's going to give them trouble. It's as simple as that. It's going to give them trouble. I expect more attention to be on Stephon Diggs tonight. Emmanuel Sanders was thriving off of the deep balls, though, and the wind gusts should change that. If you're asking me to choose between, in the $6,000 range, Emmanuel Sanders and Matt Breida, I would choose Emmanuel Sanders solely because of the upside that wide receivers have for variance, the variance you've seen on that upside for Emmanuel Sanders specifically from his ceiling outcomes tonight. So I do think that he's in play. If you're asking me about captain options, I think that the best captain options on the slate are going to come from those obvious plays we've already talked about, like a Josh Allen, a Stephon Diggs, and Mac Jones, just because their points are so damn secure relative to other players on this slate tonight. Other options would be a Jakobi Meyers. I think Cole Beasley is relatively in play there, but I'll go with the upside of a Jakobi Meyers, just more overall down passes that go more downfield, nothing too much to have the wind jump into it. And because of that, I'll actually say Emmanuel Sanders is a captain option. So top 5 captain options, if you don't want to get too frisky and risky with like a defense, something like that, I would say is going to be those 5 names. The 3 guys up top, Jakobi Meyers, Emmanuel Sanders. I could probably be talked into by the time the live stream comes, Cole Beasley as well. Next up on the slate is going to be Ramondre Ramondre Stevenson, who we don't like Damian Harris. I mean, look, if you want to play Damian Harris, just play Ramondre Stevenson. Ramondre Stevenson is $4,000 cheaper than Damian Harris, and he's going to play, I don't know, 30% of the snaps to Damian Harris's 35% tonight. He's going to see 8 carries to Damian Harris's 10 to 11 carries tonight. So just play Ramondre Stevenson, right? And if anything, there's a chance that Ramondre Stevenson can see more usage tonight. He has a positive 47% run blocking advantage. All these running backs for New England do today against Buffalo. In the last 2 games, yeah, you've seen the snaps go down with Damian Harris back to 27% and 32%, leading to just 9 and 13 touches in those 2 games. But again, if you get 9 and 13 touches, that's an average of what? 11 touches per those 2 games with Damian Harris back. If you get 11 touches out of a $5,600 running back on a showdown slate that is lacking any real upside in value, it's going to be in play. So he's going to be in play for me. Next up is going to be a couple of tight ends. So look, you see some tight ends, some kickers, some defenses popping up as we're starting to get towards the value range. And yeah, Dawson Knox is definitely in play. He's been an every down player since returning from injury. He's played 98% and 90% of the snaps in the last 2 games. So yeah, Dawson Knox is definitely in play. He's seen 4 red zone targets during that time in the last 2 games, and it's led to, like you saw on Thanksgiving, a 2-touchdown day. Strong price for a tight end here who has touchdown upside, I think, at $5,400. If you're asking me to choose a $5,000 player this week between Ramondre Stevenson, Dawson Knox, and the man who's up next in Hunter Henry, I would be choosing in this range Dawson Knox. The man does not leave the field. He's going to run 25 to 30 routes, and I expect him to be involved in the red zone. The opposite could be said for Hunter Henry. I mean, maybe not the opposite. He's definitely going to be involved in the red zone. He's going to run some routes, but maybe not a lot of routes. The problem with Hunter Henry is just the fact that if he doesn't score a touchdown, he's not doing anything for you, as can be seen in the last 2 games when he's literally scored under 5 fantasy points in each game. He has at least 1 red zone target game in every single game since week 3. It's just getting low volume. Like, you're getting literally 2 to 3 targets in most games, maybe 4 out of Hunter Henry. And if he's not finding the end zone, he is closing out games with 1 to 2 catches for 15 to 25 yards. And at $5,200, he needs a touchdown, right? So it is touchdown or bust city. He is the ultimate touchdown or bust player probably this entire season is going to be Hunter Henry here. So Hunter Henry is in play, touchdown or bust, but I would prefer the tight end from the Buffalo Bills and Dawson Knox. So we're below $5,000. Before we keep going, I will start to build out a super draft lineup. They have a $25,000 contest tonight. If you're not familiar with super draft, it's lovely. There's no salary cap. You play whoever the hell you want. It's a multiplier-based format. So it's a multiplier-based format, but the contest also doesn't fill. This contest has over 1,400 people in it, and that's how much you can potentially fill it. It'll probably fill at like 1,200 people, so you literally have to face 200 less people for the money. It is the best spot to put your dollar rooskies tonight if you're indeed trying to win money. And since it is multiplier-based, it really just comes down to what you think projections are on players. And lucky for you, I have projections tonight for these guys on Super Draft. So the projections for Super Draft are showing me that I believe Cole Beasley, based on not only his projection but his multiplier, is going to be your best captain option on Super Draft tonight. You can fill in the rest after that. So I think Cole Beasley is the best captain option there tonight. This is just kind of like a mock little lineup with Josh Allen, Josh Myers, or Jacoby Myers, and Mac Jones, and then you have to fill in one more guy. So that's going to be Super Draft. If you want to play Cole Beasley in the captain spot, if you want to get an option tonight over on Super Draft to potentially win that $25,000 contest, you use the code SAL and you get a free $25 Rooskies over there. The proud partners and part of this show with Prize Picks is going to be superdraft.io, code SAL for a $25 Rooski for free credit to play over there. And now let's close it up with the below $5,000 plays. Devin Singletary is a guy hard not to like if there's no Zach Moss again. He had a very impressive on Thanksgiving, 68% of the snaps in that game. He led Buffalo with 15 rushing attempts. He had 1 target on a catch, so he ended up having 16 touches. I'm going to expect similar usage. Maybe it goes closer to 60-40 with Matt Breida, but out of all these guys down here, it is going to look impressive. I would prefer Devin Singletary to a Hunter Henry. You get both of the kickers here, and this is the big thing. 50-mile-per-hour wind gusts. How involved are the kickers going to be? And if they are involved, how long is it until the wind gusts are going to become a factor? So the kickers are in play, but less so than usual. Tread lightly tonight. Their projections are going to look decent, not great, but 6.5 to 7.5 fantasy points or so is going to look decent when all these guys are kind of projecting out for similar as a kicker, but their points are not as secure. One, because it's a lower game environment, which a lower team total is actually somewhat good for kickers. It means more field goals, less touchdowns, so more 3 points to 5 points and less point after attempts, right? But the weather is interesting here. If I had to choose one play between the kickers and the defenses, I think both defenses are clearly in play. If I had to choose one, I would choose the $3,800 Bills defense. One, they're the cheapest, not by a ton, but they are the cheapest of all these kickers and defenses. Two, they are facing the lower implied team total of Mac Jones and the Patriots. And Mac Jones doesn't make a lot of mistakes. I understand that, but the Bills will be able to generate some pressure here, and more so in general, it's just a pricing play for what is all very similar priced teams. Like the defenses and the kickers here are basically projecting out for like 6 to 9 points. All of them. Might as well take the one that is the cheapest if they're all kind of the same thing. So this becomes a very quick dead range, right? Like Ramondre Stevenson below $6,000, he's not secure. Dawson Knox and Hunter Henry, let's be honest here. I mean, Dawson Knox has a little bit more upside without a touchdown, independence of touchdowns, but for the most part, probably touchdown or busts. And then you get to Devin Singletary, who is somebody you never really want to rely on, but if you're going to get 15 or so touches, or even 12 touches at 4,600, it's going to be a bargain. And then the kickers and defenses is take you down to the bottom of the slate where you get some guys you don't really want to play, but they have some upside here. Like a Brandon Bolden, who's going to be playing about 30% of the snaps. He's consistently playing 30% of the snaps. He only has 4 attempts, though, on the ground in the last 3 games. He's getting you there more so through the air. He has 9 catches in the last 3 games on 9 targets. So expect in this game maybe 2 to 4 checkdowns, especially with the weather. 2 to 4 checkdowns to Brandon Bolden at 3,200. You're probably more so than not from a 2 to 3 checkdown performance looking at 5 or 6 fantasy points. And that doesn't sound like a lot at 3,200, but it's a good chance that he beats out the kickers and defenses at 6 fantasy points and you get him on a discount. The most obvious play below this price tag that I think people go to, and if the ownership gets too high, I currently have it coming in at 28%, double the ownership of Brandon Bolden, similar to the ownership of the defenses and kickers, even a little more than there. But I think Nelson Agholor is going to pick up a lot of ownership. Look, he's just a wide receiver too. Like, even though Kendrick Bourne's producing the most, Kendrick Bourne plays out of the slot. You're getting the most routes and snaps, 84% of the snaps in week 12, the most he's seen since week 2. And in that game, he produced 3 catches for 20 yards on 3 targets. And here's the thing. We already have his over 18.5 receiving yards. So he would have barely got there last week with 20. He's not heavily involved in the offense. This team doesn't throw a lot in general. Mac Jones doesn't throw downfield often. So all the wide receivers, he zones in on Jacoby Myers. He's now zoning in on Mr. Kendrick Bourne. In the red zone, he looks at Mr. Hunter Henry. So you get Nelson Agholor, kind of being the afterthought, but he should not be priced at this low on a showdown slate when he's going to be going out there and running 25 routes. He's averaging 28 routes run per game. It is not often that you get at $3,000 a wide receiver who is athletic with downfield usage who is averaging 28 routes per game. So yes, although he's picking up ownership, I don't think it's too dramatic yet. 28% projected ownership on Patreon. If you want my projections on rankings, ownership, all that stuff, and Optimizer, Discord access, even more to start off your lovely month of December, you can check it out down below. The rest of these jabronis on this slate, Jonnu Smith. Look, Jonnu Smith's coming off of a game, I believe, where he saw like almost a career high, the most he's seen since week 5. Not a career high, but this season high with the Patriots. The most he's seen since week 5, 4 targets, right? But he only ran 12 routes. The most he's ran since week 8 when he ran 14 routes. So you're not getting much here. You're getting Jonnu Smith to run like 10 to 12 routes. 4 targets is likely not going to be his high. He'll normally see 2 to 3 targets. So expect 2 to 3 targets, which means expect 1 to 2 receptions for Jonnu Smith. And at this price tag of $2,400, it is touchdown or bust for him. We'll keep him in play for that reason. Gabe Davis is the clear wide receiver 4 for Buffalo. I think a lot of people know this that keep track of just fantasy in general. And to prove that, in the last 3 games, he's only ran 33 total routes. But it has led to 10 targets in 3 games, 179 yards, 7 receptions. So expect in this game probably around 2 to 3 targets, maybe 4. It keeps him in play at $1,200. The problem is his deep ball shots that he sometimes gets for touchdowns are going to be somewhat limited with the weather. If you ask me to choose between Gabe Davis and Jonnu Smith, I mean, I think they're both going to run 10 to 12 outs, and half the price is Gabe Davis. So I'll take Gabe Davis over Jonnu Smith. After this, Zach Moss, I currently have him not playing. He was a healthy scratch last week. We'll track the inactives on the live stream. Isaiah McKenzie, I don't think you can go there. He's only been over 3 fantasy points once this entire season, and that came on just an end-around jet sweep rushing touchdown against the Jets a few weeks back. And N'Keal Harry is not part of this offense. He is technically the wide receiver 4 on this offense, but he only ran 1 route in week 12. He ran 7 routes in week 11 in garbage time, catching both of his passes on 2 targets. So I'm not expecting much usage here. I don't think he's in play. So the best play, if you're asking me, if you're like, let's do it this way. The best play below, let's say $4,000, I think is Nelson Agholor in the Bills defense. And then if you're looking for even below that, the best play below $2,000 is Gabe Davis. I get asked a lot, who's the best play below 1,000? There's nobody. Like, if Zach Moss is active, I'll say Zach Moss. He might have like 6 carries. But if Zach Moss is inactive, you're choosing between Isaiah McKenzie and N'Keal Harry. I would expect Isaiah McKenzie to play, let's say, 8% of the snaps to N'Keal Harry's, let's say, 5% of the snaps. So if that helps. But it's an interesting slate. It is a low-scoring slate, so take on variance and take on weird things happening. If you end up going to a Josh Allen captain spot or a Steph Diggs or a Mac Jones captain spot, they're obviously expensive. It becomes a lot more difficult to fit the rest of your lineup together, but it is possible, but you're probably going to have to build through the kickers and the defenses. This is a slate with a 41 implied team total and heavy win where the defenses are very much so in play. And the defenses in the captain spot I don't normally like, but I do think they naturally give you leverage, and tonight they will be in play. They're not my favorite captains by any extent, but they will be in play. I think defenses look better than kickers tonight for obvious reasons of low total games, less offense moving the ball, and the wind being a massive factor at 50 miles per hour, lowering the total by 7 points. So Bills defense, Patriots defense, that's some cheap options for you. Nelson Aguilar, the mid-range is very touchdown or bust. Get your guys up top who are somewhat secure. So that's where we're at. We'll be live at 6 p.m. to close up this slate and close up the Week 13 slate. And then we slide up on into closer to Christmas, closer to Week 14, closer to Christmas, closer to officially being Xmas Sal right now, but closer to officially being Christmas Sal, Santa Sal. How you doing? I appreciate y'all tuning in today. Before you go, support the sponsors of the show, Prize Picks and SuperDraft. 25 free bucks on SuperDraft, 100 free bucks to play with over on Prize Picks. Code SAL for both of those beautiful sites. I appreciate you tuning in, and I'll see you all in the next one.